Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Rutherford County Policy Committee meeting, November 8th, 2022. The first order of business tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance by Ms. Ariana. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much. We'll take a motion on approval of the agenda.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Ms. Bratton.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Anyone wish to abstain? Motion, the agenda passes. Mr. Sullivan, would you like to do our introductions for the board?
Yeah, so we have several new policy members, so our policy committee members. So just kind of going around the room, I'll introduce our staff. So we have Dr. Carrie Holman, principal at Laverne Middle School, Dr. Mark Goyen, our director of federal programs, Dr. Kay Martin, our longest senior member of our policy meeting. I announce that every time, sorry, Kay. She serves as our secondary coordinator. Caitlin Benavides, she is the media specialist at Rocky Fork Middle. Of course, Mr. Reed, and then I don't know our new members. So
This is Susan Quisenberry.
very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
We have Shannon Creekmore. You are at, I've gone blank, Wilson. Okay, perfect. And we did this last time. We have two of our teachers of the year. So that is where Ms. Benavides and Ms. Creekmore are from. And then Mr. Brooks, what area of the county do you kind of live in?
We're on TV, so don't.
Yeah, you're not your whole address. North, south, east, west. Just curious what all Yes.
I'm in Smart.
Perfect. Perfect. Got it. Okay. And then, yeah, we'll go through it.
Mr. Young, and then Ms. Rosales, and then Mr. Tidwell. And then we have Claire Maxwell, Ms. Katie Darby, and Ms. Sheila Bratton to round off the table. And legal, we have Mr. Jeff Reed, and we have Ms. Monica Ridley.
And this is Kelsey Bigford. She's our new paralegal.
Welcome. Thank you so much. So now we're going to turn it over to Ms. Ridley.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here, our first policy committee. Thank you to all the new members that have agreed to serve. We appreciate that. So just a little bit about policy committee and the purpose that it serves. So this is the place where policies are discussed, proposed changes are discussed. Sometimes it is a change in the law that we have to change our existing policies. So I usually will indicate that if it's a change in the law. Sometimes TSBA gives us model policies, and so I'll indicate that also on the agenda. And I'll tell you this is a model policy from TSBA. Sometimes we have policies that are policy changes that are proposed by staff members, by principals, by teachers, by students sometimes, by parents in the community, and of course board members. So all that comes here. I put everything on the agenda, and then it is the role of this committee to be the gatekeepers. So we have kind of people from all areas that can help us sort through all these things, because of course we can't be experts on all these subjects. And so that's why the members are here, and then we discuss them and decide what needs to be changed, if anything, and then go from there, okay? All right, so without...
Add a couple things to that?
Oh, sure, yes, sir.
So just a couple of things, because this is, I guess, my second one serving as director of schools. The first one was a previous board. And why I feel like it's essential is that it helps set just the various stakeholders, because we have an elected board. I am employed by the 7 elected board members. We have educators and parents, and there's various stakeholders. When it comes to policy, policy in law is truly the job of the school board. And so although we will make recommendations, we'll have discussions, ultimately changing policy and those different types of things has to go through multiple readings at the school board level. So just kind of understand that even if something were to go through or die, any of that really, for our terms, doesn't necessarily matter, because the school board is charged with setting policy. This is just a committee that is able to set, here is the role from all the multiple stakeholders that we have. Why I feel like it's essential to continue is that, yes, we have elected officials, and elected officials have public pressure and political pressure that me as a director of schools being appointed and not elected, I don't necessarily have. I'm aware of them, but I don't have those same political pressures. Our teachers and community members also don't have those same political pressures. So it helps us be able to see blind spots to where the board members can tell us blind spots as educators that we don't see, and we can also advocate for those as well. It is an awkward situation and an awkward role, and so, but it is essential for us to all have those kind of things on the display. And if you would just flip to like the third page, I think it's good to just look at what a policy looks like. And we're not reviewing this yet, I'm just kind of so that our new members can look. These are the way our policies look, and so you'll see where we review them annually. We have our Board of Education, we have a descriptor, and this is our descriptor for school board meetings. There's a code of where do we find it. There's when was the last time it was issued and or reissued date. And then you have all the language and paragraphs down beside it. The very last thing I'll call your attention to, if you'll go to page 2 of 2, just flip over to the next page, sorry, that would have been easier. With a lot of our policies, you are going to see a legal reference or a cross-reference. If it is a legal reference, that's usually connecting to Tennessee Code Annotated, sometime federal law, and or may state board policy, something like that. Or if it's got cross-references, that means it's probably connecting back to one of our own procedures, or one of our own policies, sorry. So just wanted you to understand kind of what all that information meant. So now it's all yours, Monica.
Okay.
Sorry if I stole any of your thunder.
No, thank you so much. That is very helpful. All right, without further ado, let's start with the first one in policy changes, which is policy 1.400 regarding school board meetings. And we were asked to put this on the agenda just for a general discussion, no proposed language here, but just general discussion about signs and posters at school board meetings. So right now, and this was changed earlier this year, this calendar year, I believe. Right now we have visitors are prohibited from bringing posters or signs in excess of 8.5 by 11 inches in size into the board meeting due to the impact on visibility, which disrupts public participation and creates safety concerns. So that is what our current policy states.
Something I would like to add, I was the one that suggested this, having been on both sides of the podium here. I think this sent, especially during the time that this was written, it sent a message to those parents that were wanting to visit that they were being restricted. I'm not necessarily opposed to the 8.5 by 11 inches. Also, I'd like to point out that before this, there was no restriction and there was no issues. So I think it may be something worth considering, even if we had like a poster board side, maybe you could say you sit in the back row if you have a poster board side, so you're not having any kind of visibility issues, but it would also send a message back to those that this is, we want our parents here. We want them to participate. They do have free speech rights, and that we are going to allow them to use that free speech. And I don't foresee any issues with this going forward, but that is why I proposed it, the change.
I said you knew it'd be needed. Mr. Tidwell, I respect what you've just said, and you know that I do. You weren't sitting on this side of the table at that time. You were sitting out there. And as you well know, it looks different from both sides. There's nothing in this world wrong with an 8.5 by 11 sign expressing your opinion or your parental rights. I do not want to see the size increased because I know it's like opening the gate a tiny little bit, and the next thing you know, we have posters outside and we have all kinds of nefarious beings. Now, you were here when some of it got out of hand. I know you were, because you probably were rolling your eyes at some of the things. I just do not believe we need to change this policy at this time. That doesn't mean that we can't come back and look at it again. It's my 2 cents worth.
What happens next?
Any other discussion?
And wasn't that fun?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, my opinion still stands, but I don't know, I don't want to, like,
Do you have proposed language, Mr. Tidwell?
my proposed language would be that if we're basically going to a work session or going to a board meeting where there would be a vote, my proposed language would be that we change the sign limitations to allow poster boards in the back row of the area for those that wanted to display that way. Again, I'll just reinstate that COVID was a unique example, and I don't believe that's going to be a returning thing moving forward. I understand that it's difficult on both sides, so I see that, and it'll be up to the board to vote their opinion, but I would like to propose that as well.
Yeah, y'all are part of the, you can say, yeah.
Get a microphone.
I would love to, in regards to that, I'm coming from, my voice carried, coming from more looking at it from the administrative standpoint, and then looking at it from the perception, and then the presentation, anytime that you're having some type of meeting. If by having a one size, I do believe that it would lend itself to a more civilized approach, and here's the reason I would say that. If you then open it to any type of size, then I, as a parent, let's say someone decides they want to come in and roll out butcher paper where they have created a yard sign that's quite large, because we do know people will be very creative in their endeavors to be heard or to be seen. And so with that, I think that it's great that the board, when you all are looking at the 8 by 5 times by 11, that it sets a standard, and therefore, because if you then go to different sizes, then you're having to police making sure the person sits in the back. Then are you going to be scrutinized by the notion of, now you're telling me I can't sit in the front, that I have to sit in the back, and then if my banner is too large, am I getting into someone's space, therefore creating a safety issue, particularly if you have something of large size that could carry something with it?
I think you were talking about just poster board, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
Just
But still, I mean, those still valid points. I appreciate that.
I think poster size, 8.5 and 11, you know, this is not very big. If somebody's going to be in the back of the room, you're not going to be able to see that. So I think poster size should be the limit of the size if we do change it.
I think if we're finished with discussion, Ms. Sharp, I think somebody could make a motion, or
Okay, I would like to make a motion that for the proposed language, do we know what poster board size is if we got to have specific numbers?
I do not know.
I think average poster board size is 22 by 28.
And that's also something that could be put on our page, because there are rules that they have to go by, because they have to sign up to speak, and so there are parameters on that when you come to the board. So that can always be put.
Because it's a fine balance. We want to make sure we're right, so we also want to protect the decorum of our meetings.
Absolutely.
Same. Yeah, I don't want somebody coming in here with like a 8-foot banner, but
No, there's also, like, you can do 11, 17, 18 by 24, 24 by 36, seem to be kind of the steps.
did you say 22 by 28? Was that the?
That was another one, too. I would almost say you probably don't need anything bigger than an 18 by 24.
Not to exceed.
18 by 24? Now I'd like to make a motion to approve that.
And they would have to sit in the back row? Okay.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone wish to abstain? Anyone opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay.
You think we better take a roll call vote on this?
Roll call? Okay.
I think we'll need clarification on who's voting and what's voting. Because in past, and that's just a conversation to have, past policy committee meetings, every policy member voted. And if that's not the role, we need clarification on what we're doing, because I don't want to put our staff in an uncomfortable position as well.
Mr. Reed, can you help us on that one?
Policy committee members are always voting. Of course, it ultimately goes to the board for approval, so this is really just an advisory body to the board. So regardless of what this body does, it'll be up to the Board of Education either accept it or to change it.
There's really nothing this group does is binding in any way whatsoever, correct?
Roll call? Okay. Mr. Reed, does that include you and me? Okay. Making sure.
Can we change that real quick?
Hey, I just want to mention grass.
Yes.
So you said it wasn't political, grass.
Grass, very good point.
All right. Dr. Sullivan?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks? Ms. Questenberry? Yes. Ms. Benavides? Yes. Ms. Creekmore? Yes. Dr. Holman? Dr. Goulian? No. Dr. Martin? No. Ms. Darby?
Yes.
Ms. Rosales? Mr. Young? No. Ms. Bratton? No. Ms. Maxwell? Yes. Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
And Ms. Sharp?
Yes.
Nine yeses, 5 noes, 1 abstain. Okay. I will make those changes, and then the next thing is it will be on the next board agenda. It takes 2 readings, so 2 board agendas.
So our next board agenda is due to Ms. Hopkins by Monday. Is that?
A tight turnaround, but I will do my best.
Okay. That's what I was getting to. We have to, that's a tight turnaround.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, next one is policy 1.404, appeals to and appearances before the board. This is another one for discussion, and this would be specifically regarding the notice that's required to sign up to speak before the board. Right now, the policy is 24 hours prior to the meeting. So if the board meeting is on a Thursday at 5, visitors who wish to speak to the board would have to sign up with Ms. Hopkins, and they can email her by Wednesday at 5.
I guess I'll start the discussion on this one as well. Again, I've had some parents reach out to me that are interested in what's happening with the school board and/or work sessions, and they'll check out the agenda maybe the day of, and if they see something on there that they would like to get addressed, or like to just even say something, or and it's not always negative, it can be positive as well, but they'd like to speak, then they are outside of that 24-hour window. It doesn't feel like that's completely necessary. I think prior to this change, the limit was 15 minutes before the meeting started, and if you have been a regular attendee, we are not short visitors, or we're not overcrowded with visitors often, especially speakers. So I think we have the timetable for those that do want to speak. I don't see the negative side to this. So I'd like to open that up to what was previously done, is that correct? I think Jennifer Hopkins said 15 minutes before.
It was.
That's correct, okay.
And I was fine with it before, but obviously what we went through the last 2 years was, I did notice that most people that came to us were not in a good mood. And if something was to happen, or you would see something you didn't like, at least allowing 24 hours gave you time to get your thoughts together and not come in and just blast away. And so that's my only reason, was the 24-hour rule was actually a pretty good rule, but that's just my thoughts.
I do think we need to change it, because there are times that there's things on the agenda that the night before, that some people don't have the opportunity to want to speak the day off, not necessarily because they're angry, but because they just happen to look at the agenda. So if we can change the time of not sticking to a 24-hour notice to allow people that didn't have time, that saw it that night and wanted to speak but couldn't speak because of the 24-hour limit.
What about noon? So there's a
Yeah,
couple.
noon is something reasonable to at
Right.
least to have it the day of the meeting.
'Cause I can
You
see-
may want to quell, you know, the number of
Yeah.
submissions. So you won't be bombarded at the last minute, oh, well, it's 15 minutes and you're sending something at 14 minutes and 59 seconds. Okay, I sent the deadline. So I get that. But just the 24 hours is just limiting people that see the agenda at the last minute and they didn't see, or we had a special call meeting last minute, and we didn't have the agenda up for, 48 hours. So at least give some fairness in that sense.
I like the noon. I talked to Ms. Hopkins about this, and that sometimes it is good to, or every time it's good to have a little bit of background, because some problems you can address, and if it's involving a student-specific confidentiality thing, it sometimes doesn't need to be said in public. And if we know that's the event, and just having someone communicate that, we a lot of times can take care of those issues. The other part I think it does allow for us to do is that during COVID, school board meetings became kind of the national place for no matter what you were mad about to complain about. And we are charged with running our school system and doing the best for our students. We're not charged with fixing society on the national or local or really even state level. We're charged with education and doing that aspect of it. And so it does give us time to check to make sure that there are people that live in our district or an educator, because that's what we're charged with as Rutherford County.
So you're talking about coming down, so
I think noon is perfect.
on second thought, that would be okay with me.
I think noon's a happy medium.
Noon's a happy medium.
Yeah, I'll make
Okay,
that
here I
motion.
go.
Oh, wait, Ms.
Oh, go ahead, Ms. Bryant.
It's okay, Ms. Rosales.
No, go ahead, because I was going to make a motion, so go for it.
Please let me just say this. Folks, I agree, parents need to speak. I also know that our agendas are printed in plenty of time for someone who is interested in coming to see us, to see that agenda way ahead of time. If people choose not to look at that agenda till the night before, that's on them. So let's make sure that parents realize that, or anyone, that they have a responsibility to check out what we're talking about. And if they want to speak, we have given 24 hours. Folks, some boards make it 48 hours. Some boards make it a week, which is ridiculous, yes. I just want to say that 24 hours seems to be a very, very good time frame to make sure that we can take care of anything that Dr. Sullivan was talking about, and to make sure that people who really want to talk to us are here to talk to us about the right things.
Any more discussion? Go ahead.
I think noon is a nice compromise. Most of the time, these parents are getting up and they're voicing their concerns. It's not something, we're not engaging in conversation, so it's really not anything we need to respond to unless it's an issue, like you stated, that you can take care of ahead of time. I mean, I'm a parent and I have 3 kids, and there are times, schedules are crazy, things happen, sick kids, all kind of stuff where you may not have time. And I don't really want to limit or come across as a board that's trying to limit that in any way. We're here to serve our students, our parents, our teachers, our faculty, our staff. They should all feel free to come. So I think noon is a nice compromise. Just my 2 cents.
Yep. So usually 5 days. And so we have a meeting on the 22nd. That is by the 14th is when everything is due to our administrative assistant. And then that one doesn't have a work session, so that one's a little bit different because of the Thanksgiving holiday. But usually we have it before, we'd have the week before the work session.
So if it's posted 5 days prior to, when do are parents aware that it's posted 5 days prior to the actual board meeting day?
There's no email that goes out, so they have to go and look to see if it's posted. And I'll have to say, when I've asked for it to be 5 business days, because when we post it on a Friday and it's 5 business days and our meeting is on a Tuesday, you know, you have the weekend, but everybody's got football, basketball, baseball, you know, choir or something like that. So I think the intent of this is to give them a little bit more time for those who have, you know, a lot of things, not that we don't all have something going on, but to give them a little bit more time to say, hey, I didn't know this was out there, I've been out of town, or I've you know, was tied up with this, but I would still like to come and speak.
And we try to hit the 5 business days. Where we run into is meeting twice a month. If we have everything due on a Monday the week before, and then we turn around and have a work session on Tuesday, then we have a board meeting on Thursday, we are oftentimes working on an agenda for the board session that is in 3 weeks instead of the one that we need to. So it's just it's a logistics. We try, but they're in meeting, we try to make those work.
I think 5 days, having 5 days there, I think that's very appropriate and gives individuals the opportunity. It's just that when you, in looking at 20, I'm a parent, and all of my children matriculated through this great school system. And calling the day of and then wanting to get on the board meeting, out of respect for board members, I would think that, you know, your time is valuable as board members, and to know that your agendas may change in a matter of 3 hours, 4 hours before your meeting, because you're now going to have said number of parents, unless is there a number?
30 minutes.
It's 30 minutes.
It's 30 minutes?
Yeah.
How many
They
parents
can't.
can speak in a night?
10.
And outside of COVID, normally that's not
Yeah, there's very seldom that we have more than 1 or 2 speakers.
zoning.
So, yeah, zoning.
Zoning
So,
will get it.
Yeah.
Now,
What if, did
Now-
I just jinx this?
well, you did. We've had wonderful, non-chaotic, calm, formal, lovely meetings for a long time. Folks, it's not always like this. You just know that sometimes there are issues that are red hot and they aren't lovely and calm and sweet and nice. And yes, we don't have it right now, but that doesn't mean it can't change on a dime. And then we've done this. So please think about what you're doing.
Any further discussion?
Because the thing, like, I was in one of those conversations. I was one of these parents that got to the podium. And, you know, after I spoke, I was looked at as an evil person. I was looked at as one of those ones that were upset. But now, given the situation for me, that was a heated thing for me. This was my child. We were talking about a specific thing. Now, that can come up again, yes. But I say again, what are we here for? What do we have a board for? If we're not going to also take just the good and then get some bad and be okay with it, then what do we need to do this for? We should be here for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because that's what, listen, I'm just gonna be honest, that's why I step up to the voting box, and that's why I, Robert Brooks, as a parent, vote for a school board. Because I wanna make sure that I have the right people in place who are gonna be able to listen. If I wanna come in here and be heated about something, I wanna make sure that there's a board in place that's gonna listen. Now, you may not like it, and that's okay. But then, I mean, that's really the gist of it. If a mom comes in here with a concern, as a parent, I want to make sure that she has the platform and that she's able to speak. Because that concern to her it's a concern because that's her heart. She's trusting her children. She's trusting her children to come under your leadership, to fall under our leadership. Because as a board, when we look at policies, like I'm excited to be here for this. Because I have an opportunity as a parent now to put my hands to the plow. And I just don't blow smoke. I want to trust that if I come in here again with an issue, that you're going to be okay. Because I'm in your district. And I'm okay with saying that my button, when I pushed the button, I knew exactly what I was doing.
I don't think you're in my district. Did you say you're in Smyrna?
Yes, ma'am.
No, you're not in my district, sorry.
You sure?
I'm positive.
Okay.
I don't have in Smyrna.
Well, whatever.
But-
It doesn't matter. But that's the thing. If we're going to say, well, we just want all the meetings to be nice and good, and let's just have everybody that comes in here smiling and have flowers and candy. Well, sometimes it's not going to be that way. You're gonna have people-
Absolutely not, and we don't expect it to. I'm just saying that it appears to me that if you, and you did, want to speak at the meeting, you check to see that agenda 24 hours ahead of time. You did it right, and you were here.
And I'll be honest. Let me just say something to that as well. And I'm not here to argue or anything. I don't want anybody to be like, he does. This is what it is. I didn't check the agenda at all. I had no idea. I had no idea what I was not even educated. I was just a parent who was thinking about my poor 11-year-old who was going to be put in a situation, man, I'm sorry, who was going to be put in a situation where she was going to struggle. So when my wife said, this is what's going on, I said, okay, fill out the form and get me in there. Now, I had no idea I was going to be speaking. I didn't. Because they said, hey, you may not speak at all. And when they called my name, that's why I said, I didn't know I was going to be saying anything. Because I would have had something wrote down. And I probably would have been able to conduct myself a little better. Would have been able to be like, all right, here it is. So I'm with it. Parents have no idea that there's an agenda out here. They have none. If we educate, let's educate them. Let's educate them. And then we can get them to where they understand the 24-hour rule or 12 o'clock. And then I think you'll start to see that'll go down. And then we just have it in place. That way, if we do get to a heated place where we were, then guess what? We have 12 o'clock already set. If you're not in by 12, well, and if we say, hey, there's only 10 people that can speak. If you get number 11 at 12 o'clock on whatever day, guess what? They can't speak because it's a policy. We have it in place. But we can't just say, nope, let's not do this because we don't want bad. We want all good. It's just, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't.
I think what is also important for us, we have to educate myself, I have to educate the public as well, is that during COVID, the board got charged with pretty much everything, and day-to-day operations are the responsibility of the director of schools. That's what I'm employed to do, is to handle the problems on a day-to-day basis. Doesn't mean it doesn't need to go to the board, but oftentimes, especially when it involves curriculum, it involves employment decision, I'm the one that has to handle that in the first place. And just educating that to our parents that let me know the concerns, you can let the board know as well, that's fine. But I'm ultimately going to be the one that has to decide those things and fix them. So I think it's a great point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point that Ms. Brooks said, that the district really consider our forms of communication, letting parents know that it's truly out there for 5 days. We want you to be informed. This is why we have it out for you. Because if parents don't know that, I'm like you, Ms. Brooks. And I've been in the district a long time. I wouldn't have known how to.
You've looked at every agenda, haven't you, Dr. Holman? Every one of those.
So yes, I mean, parents knowing that they have this information from them, I think it'd be great.
Well, there's also the side that sometimes things happen to their child during the school day, and it may not have anything to do with anything that is actually on the agenda, that they feel they need to come bring to the board's attention that may come up that very day or just the day before. I'm just going to reiterate, I think the noon is a nice compromise.
Will it be possible to add the language on 5 days? Because calendar days versus business days is very different. Because if you say 5 business days, you don't count holidays or Saturdays or Sundays. So normally the agenda is posted 5 calendar days. So if we can specify on the policy about that, that'll be great. And if we can post that on the website, that'll be also be great for parents to be aware.
And we post that 5 days before the official meeting, not necessarily before the work session.
Oh, okay, so whatever that language is that he just said, 5 days before the official meeting.
That's just my only concern. My concern is, from a logistics standpoint, backing things up so that meetings are on top of meetings.
Right. No, and that's, I just think we need to have that clarification on the policy about the 5 days. It's before the meeting,
For regular meetings.
or regular
correct.
meetings,
for
yeah.
Special call. can be
Special call
called an
meetings, totally
emergency.
different, yeah. Exactly. With the exception of special called meetings and what was the other type of meeting? Special call meeting and work sessions, yeah. So if we can add that language to the policy to clarify that, that will also be good. And if we can post that on the website of how that is communicated, that will be great.
Currently, there's no under state statute, there's no
Notice requirement for meetings saying there's a 5-day requirement or such. That's not anything in our policy currently as it's written now either. We do have a 24-hour thing for speakers in there, but there's no provision at all addressing how long in front of a meeting the agenda has to go out and be published. There have been often times where we've had to have things added to agendas the day before a meeting. It's not normal, but when emergencies come up, we have had to do that multiple times. So I'd probably steer you against trying to do a 5-day requirement. 'Cause
Okay.
that will, from a practical standpoint, it doesn't work too well.
Okay.
So I know that's what the system strives to do, and they do a good job of trying to adhere to that. But there will be times where things are added to the agenda the day before a meeting.
And that may seem trivial, but for example, we had a wrestling coach who resigned their position, and we found out the day of the last board meeting. So I added them to the consent agenda, and
Yeah.
technically, if that would violate policy because that one
Sure.
portion wasn't part of it.
And that's fine. It's a good point to make, but could there be clarification, could there be some, I mean, I'm just asking, we don't have to actually do it, but that is subject to change as part of that, to say that, yes, it's posted 5 days, but it is subject to change, meaning that in what you see here today may not necessarily be there 3 days later, or 4 days later, or even 5 days later, like subject to change.
I think that's good. That would actually go back to policy 1.400,
So do you want to make a motion for the 12-hour?
the noon first.
No, well, it's to the noon, yeah.
And then the other portion
And
would
the
actually go
portion
back
of
to
it-
policy 1.400, school board
Yeah.
meetings, the first one.
You motion that?
Yeah, so I make a motion to change the language of the requirement to submit a request for speakers from 24 hours to noon of the day of the meeting for policy 1.404, and I'm sorry about my eyes, I'm squinting. And then going back to policy 1.400. Oh, sorry. Well, that's my motion. I thought I could add it all together.
Got it.
Is noon?
First motion is to change the time from 24 hours prior to the meeting to noon the day of the board meeting.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone wish to abstain? Motion passes to add noon to the time for speakers.
Now, do you want to
Yes.
go back? Okay.
And then I'm going to make a second motion. I thought I could lump them all together, sorry. Is for 1.400 is to clarify and add the language that the agenda will be posted 5 days prior to the board meeting with exceptions of, can I add the special interests in work sessions?
I would just look at line 1, says the
Okay.
board will transact all business at official meetings, which may be the regular, special. Regular board meeting agendas will be posted 5 days before the scheduled meeting. And I don't remember the last
But
thing
they're
I said.
subject to change.
Subject to change.
Yeah, it's subject to change. That's the motion, yes.
Because that helps us with the state law portion that's codified of no, if we have to
Yeah.
make a last second change, that way we have the
Yeah,
ability.
it doesn't bind us to the first draft. It's not final.
Absolutely, yeah, that's a great point. We have HVACs that fail in between that time, and we have to add
Mm-hmm.
it 10 minutes before. Great point.
Yeah,
Is that motion on the floor?
yeah, that's a motion.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or wish to abstain? Motion passes.
I've got it. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Dr. Martin.
All right, next policy is Policy 1.602, Administrative Committee. This one is also up for discussion regarding terms for policy committee members. We recently changed this one to add, prior to our change in August, it didn't have a term. So we had several members, Dr. Martin, and some other ones who had served on the committee for a very long time and were not even really aware of how long their commitment was. So the committee back in August voted to change this to a 2-year term.
I would recommend we change it to a 1-year term because lines 8, 9, and 10 say that the policy advisory committee will be defined by the chairman of the board and may be changed at his or her discretion. So that matches the chairman's term of 1 year.
Second.
I would like, I don't know if this would be separate, but as well, that was a change that I brought up as well. But I'd also like to maybe have some discussion as to, can we move the time where their term starts? Can we make that in October? Because the chair is elected in September, and if the chair is chosen, then why would you not have it right after the chair?
Good point.
That's a good point.
I don't know if that's separate motion than yours or the same, or I don't know how that would work.
I think you can save it as a 1-year term beginning 10/1. Wouldn't you think?
October 1st of each calendar year?
Yes.
Good point, Mr. Tidwell.
I'll second.
Oh, yes. We're just going to wait.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed or wish to abstain? Motion passes to change the term and the date of the election.
Just curious, on the members, has there ever been any thought to a high school, I know all the high schools normally have student body presidents, things of that sort. Has there ever been any consideration given to having a student member serve on the policy committee? I mean, that would then embed all truly, you're looking at all stakeholders at that point. You have an educational assistant, board members, principal, classroom teachers, supervisors, citizen at large. I mean, there's not a student representative.
I think we had talked about that before, and Ms. Bratton, would you like to speak?
Well, we have a policy for a student rep on the school board, but they have no voting privileges at all. And that's
Those would be two separate things.
that's an honorary position.
And if I recall, when it was looked into, there was a whole lot of work that the teachers had to do to actually nominate someone.
Well,
been a
Ms.
minute
Martin, Dr. Martin, I'm sorry, Kay, we had established a criteria for this, and it wasn't just you walk down the hall and say, hey, you're really cute today, why don't you go be a school board member? So there is a criteria to that. We have not come back and acted upon that again, but it is non-voting. That member does not.
I asked TSBA, Monica and I did, when in August, the way that our school board, because I want to make sure I'm following school board policy, our policy says that this begins in the spring semester. We had already missed the spring semester because of everything else that happened last spring, and so we didn't have somebody in place. There were other districts that did the same thing, and they just were waiting until the next school year to start that process. I think that's a great idea. We would just add that at that point if we choose to continue with them to this.
Put that on your list.
I've got it
Let's
running
look at.
the back of the notebook. I'm worried, though. This isn't going to make it.
But is the student a voting member of the policy committee or a non-voting member?
No, they're all on.
Just a representative to give a student point of view? Okay, is that,
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
okay.
I just feel, particularly for experience, you know, they're going to
Well,
be.
it looks really good on their CV, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do we want to make that change on the policy, or are we just gonna, once we get a student board member in place, we'll ask them to start attending?
Yeah, because this wouldn't go into place till next October anyways.
Perfect. That sounds great. Okay, moving right along, policy 1.703, school attendance zones and exemptions, excuse me.
Did
I
we
skip
vote on that one? Did we vote on that one? Okay, that's right. We didn't vote on it. You're good. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. school attendance zones and exemptions. So this one does have proposed language, and you'll see that it is highlighted, the proposed language is highlighted, and then the existing language that we are seeking to strike is obviously struck through on your packet.
So there's a couple things I would want to point out on this. If you will go to D. So this goes with our school choice and open zoning. So we're required with the new state law that went in 2 years ago to have certain timelines. We realized our timeline actually hurt us a little bit last year. So February 15th through April 15th didn't necessarily help us from a budgeting standpoint or a staffing standpoint because we didn't know how many seats were there. We've already asked for teaching positions at that point. So the request was made from our school choice coordinator for a minimum of 30 calendar days between December and April is when we go ahead and make sure that we tell them that portion. We actually have a notice going out tonight to tell parents about school choice because we will have a school choice fair on December 8th, and then we'll launch how many seats are open as of right now. And so that is the reason that we looked at it 30 days between December and April. Based on where we are each calendar year with rezoning, we may not want to have it January 1st to February 1st if we're in the middle of a rezoning for a brand new school. That gave us some wiggle room. The other portion is K. This is talking about people who are no longer, let's say they have a zone exemption to attend a program and they are no longer in that program, then they'll be removed from their school zone immediately. That also goes into M, so the student must remain in the program until completion. So Ms. Maxwell, this is something you and I have talked quite a bit about.
Yes, I was concerned that if you are granted an exemption, a waiver to go to a school to study something over there, and you decide not to stay in there, but by the way, they have seats available, so we'll just slide you down from this group to this group. That's not going to work that way. You don't get to stay because the school's under capacity. You were there, you granted a waiver for this program. If you're not in this program, if you're not fully invested in this program, you're not staying there. I wanted to make sure because I was afraid you were going to go from one bucket to another bucket and just get to stay there.
Otherwise, that could just be a door to get to the school.
Exactly.
Agree.
Is there, and also, is there any kind of put in place that someone decides the senior year that they want to go to another school? Is there anything stopping them and they just happen perhaps to be star quarterback?
Not unless if
I'm
they
just
move,
putting
we'd
it out
still be
there.
with TSSAA guidelines. So as long as they meet TSSAA guidelines with a bona fide change of residence or a hardship.
But they would have to have a bona fide. They just couldn't move because there's a spot available.
Yeah, if they had an
Ms.
athletic
Maxwell, I
residence,
think letter N, I'm sorry, Dr. Sullivan.
You're good.
to interrupt you. Letter N, I think, talks about that. Once a student has enrolled in one school, he or she will not be permitted to transfer to another outside the student's assigned zone during a given year. And that's new language, outside the student's assigned zone.
Well, I was just thinking if they wait till the next year. So I'm not asking, they may not wait until,
But
in
according,
zone, yeah.
but according to TSSAA, if they go to the new school, they don't get to play for a year, right?
That's what I wanted to
Yeah,
make
they have
sure.
to-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to encourage a bunch of, they call it portaling in the college. I don't want to have a bunch of portaling going on at the high school level because I could see this being a problem.
and this isn't this discussion, but it connects well. There is talk and movement on the name, image, and likeness for high school students. So we're not there in Tennessee yet, but just know that as we're talking about TSSAA, that is at some point coming up in the future with sponsorships, all that kind of stuff for high school kids. So it's going to be great. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome.
That is so.
So the changes that are proposed in this one are not really substantive. It's just to kind of clean it up and tighten it up as the new law that Dr. Sullivan just told you about took effect 2 years ago. So it was fairly new once we worked out some kinks. So this just kind of tightens up the policy.
Could we look at K just a minute? Ms. Darby thinks that this is a little muddy, and she's asked me to look at, instead of remove to their school zone immediately, could we say reassign to their school board immediately? Would that
Or be moved.
sound better?
My only worry
Or
is
just
to-
be moved,
be
but
moved.
not removed?
Be moved.
Yeah.
Be moved.
Okay, yeah.
Or reassigned, whichever one, but, Reassign? to
Yeah,
it.
reassign is better,
Okay.
because that's what the
We
intent of
changed
it.
that.
We're not removing it, we're
We're not gonna pick
reassigning
them up
them.
in person.
Yeah, that's kind of, what it,
No, that's a
yeah,
good
that
catch.
remove thing kind of has a negative connotation, so let's reassign them.
We have a motion on the floor.
Move to approve changes?
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone like to oppose or abstain? Motion passes for the cleanup bill.
Next one is policy 1.803, tobacco and vape-free schools. This seeks to add some language, mainly about prohibitions on advertising of tobacco products. Dr. Sullivan, do you
Yeah,
want to?
I would request that we table this one to a future policy meeting. And I don't necessarily see anything wrong with the language, but 25, 26, 27, age-appropriate, evidence-based, cross-curricular school tobacco product education shall be included in the education. We're not there. We don't have that.
We don't have the curriculum.
We have EverFi as a good program we use for that, but we don't necessarily have a curriculum. So to put a policy in place that I knowingly know that we don't have this right now, I just request we table this probably to the January meeting.
Do you have to have a motion to move
We
it?
currently have, and just
Yes,
so
the first part is what we have currently.
We already have a tobacco and vape-free school policy. That's what you see that's not highlighted. So that would stay in place. Just the highlighted language would be new.
Motion to move, motion to table this to the next
Thank you
policy.
so much. Can we have a second? Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone like to abstain or oppose? Motion passes to table to January.
Can I ask just something? Have we had anybody want to, is this first highlighted area?
No.
I was going to say, I can't imagine somebody would want, okay.
No.
Okay, next is policy 1.806, advertising and distribution of materials in the schools. This was asked to be placed on the agenda specifically regarding discussion regarding political signs, so there's no proposed language. You won't see anything highlighted or struck through on this one.
I think we just wanted to clean this one up because there's been some
Yeah.
discretion and not consistent across the board.
Number 7, really.
Number 7, that's the one that troubles me. I really feel like it is a freedom of speech, and I don't believe there's any harm in someone standing away from, he's not soliciting, not speaking to, and holding a sign quietly at an event, not during school hours, not handing any promotional materials out, just standing away from, like a football game, for example, and standing in the park lot and holding a sign. I think this has been done in the past, and for some reason, it's run afoul of several of our schools this year. So I just think we need to clean that one up because I believe it is a freedom of speech issue, and I really feel like that there's no harm in that. I think that will happen
I agree, but peacefully.
peacefully. And
Yeah.
no,
Add in the language
it needs
that's
to be
peacefully.
So who's going to, I'm asking now our principal, and I agree, like the freedom of speech portion I totally get. All I am asking is, I will vote for as an educator, not and as director of schools, because I'm not influenced necessarily by the elected portion of it. I'm looking at it from if we do this, we need to have some guidelines, because I have a hard time, ultimately the people who are going to have to enforce it, like right now, are our principals. And when we say peacefully or not peacefully, it may be fine during a general election right now. I worry about presidential elections, and I worry about if we don't put some guidelines, then it could be car rider line, bus rider pickup, all that kind of stuff. So extracurricular events open to the public, that type of stuff.
yes.
Yes, and it's extracurriculum events.
I would never allow what any policy be in place during the school hours.
So before we weren't allowed, because I asked this question also, we're not allowed on the property at all. They could not get on the sidewalk. So can we restrict it to the sidewalk? And that way it's only on the sidewalk? And they can carry a sign or they can put a sign in the grass?
Could I ask Mr. Reed, is there any something you could wade in on this and just, I don't know. Do other systems go through this? Other districts have this policy in place?
Well, the questions come up, and of course, I got a lot of emails about many board members.
We've all,
about this.
So, and then, and there's some, probably, I did call around several other systems to see what they do in regards to it. Most of, and all the ones we called did not allow it. So that's, I did not, but I'll tell you specifically, Wilson County does not allow it. So they have a policy similar to what we have. Sumner County does not allow it. They've got a similar policy. Putnam County has our same policy. Knox County has a similar policy prohibiting any kind of solicitation or advertising in any form of candidates for public office. Jackson County prohibits it. Hamilton County prohibits it. And Williamson County does not have a policy that they did not allow it. So, and specifically, we went and looked at whether school parking lots, how courts deal with those, whether, because under First Amendment cases before the Supreme Court, they look at the forums and decide what kind of forum is it. Is it a public forum? Is it a limited public forum or a non-public forum? And that means specific things in the context of First Amendment cases. So public forums are like the public square in Murfreesboro. People can go to the corner of the square, advertise, do whatever they want to. There's really very little that anybody can do to restrict that. So those type of settings. A school board meeting is really a limited public forum in the context of First Amendment rights, because you're coming to a meeting that has an agenda and you're coming here for a school purpose. So that's deemed by the court to be a limited public forum. Parking lots in school systems and during football games and election days have been deemed by the court, the Sixth Circuit, to be non-public forum. So if the school board chooses to keep its current policy in place, it can do that. But you're not required to keep the current policy in place. If you want to open it up, you can open it up to allow more expressive political advertising or signs, whatever you want to do. You are allowed to do that, but you can, with respect to private forums, non-public forums, you can restrict the type of speech so long as you don't change the topics people talk about. You can't control the content of people's speech. So if you have the existing policy and want to keep it, you can. If you want to allow it to be more open, to allow signs or advertising, that's something you can do as we can do as a school system.
They can do signs of anything, or just political?
Political signs, yeah. Political signs. So as a board, I guess a decision of the policy committee and the board ultimately decide what it wants to do. And just so the policy that we have here and the school with Rutherford County really came from TSBA, and that's why you have a lot of these other counties that have similar type policies, because a lot of them have just adopted the TSBA policy as well. But you do have some variations from county to county in regards to these, except all do kind of restrict political advertising from candidates who are in running for office.
Can I ask if anyone else is concerned about just the political climate of our nation lately? If we start opening this up at football games in parking lots, are we opening ourselves up to the potential for words to be said and then escalating matters and then involving our schools and our children and attendees to that?
I think you'd have to have very strict, I mean, I've gone to a ball game at UT where they're slapping stickers on you right and left and no one's stopping them. I'm talking about something quiet. You do not even put that sign in the ground. You hold the sign. You talk to no one. You say nothing. And you just hold a sign. Because this was done at this particular high school for several election cycles and had no issues whatsoever. And it was just this year when it became an issue. And I could see the point, and that's why we're looking at this policy and cleaning it up and putting strict parameters around it. I'm not a willy-nilly having people out there and handing out, literature as you go in. I'm talking away from the crowd. You are up here and you are holding a sign quietly.
I think your problem is going to be regulating that.
yeah.
extracurricular activities need to stay student-centered. And if we start politicizing these, we're moving it away from our students' attention. As a coach and as a parent, I would not want my extracurricular events to be politicized in any way.
You're also putting the principal in the position of policing that. And that's one of the reasons that it probably hasn't been applied consistently, because I spoke to the person who this issue came up, and the policy hasn't changed, and it hasn't changed. But I think as, you know, people retire and things like that, and you have new members of staff, they apply things differently, maybe because they're more stricter. And that's the thing that we need to do, is apply the policy consistently. And Mr. Reed, if you'll correct me, one of the reasons that this falls back to us is there's not an annotated code at the state level. There's nothing at the state level. So it does fall back to our jurisdiction. And I too am concerned about the slippery slope.
I agree with what most have said here as far as not wanting to politicize. I understand that. But I have a question. If somebody wears a political T-shirt into the ball game, do we stop them?
Nope. You don't.
I don't understand what the difference is. They're holding the sign. I mean, if they're not obstructing traffic, say they're in a parking spot. I mean, I just think you're touching real close to rights of free speech. And I understand the differences, as I guess you've mentioned, that it is not, are you saying it's not a public space, even though the public is coming? I don't quite understand that.
Isn't that the Tinker case? You can wear the political.
This is part of what the courts adopt, the analysis they adopt with respect to First Amendment cases. And you have to look at the forum where the First Amendment is being expressed to decide what type of forum is it. Is this the type of forum that is appropriate to restrict speech? And if so, to what extent can you restrict it? So, and when you have a public forum, there's very little the government can do to restrict any speech. If people want to go to the square in Murfreesboro and say whatever, the government can do very little to restrict it. When you go in the school board setting, it's deemed to be a limited public forum, so you can speak more. But you can't have rules like we're going to limit speakers to 3 minutes. You have to sign up ahead of time and things like that without violating people's First Amendment rights. And when you go in the context of school parking lots with the Sixth Circuit, which is what this federal system we're in, as James said, school parking lots are non-public forums for purposes of First Amendment purposes. And because that's not where anyone typically goes to give speeches, to address, change matters of policy and things like that. So it's usually a parking lot for kids to go to school in. So that's just a forum, how they identify a forum for purposes of First Amendment rights.
In the day-to-day operations, it terrifies me to put this in.
Yes.
But the board, if you can choose, and say this way.
Make it work.
I mean, the board chooses to allow it, you can allow it, but you can also choose to restrict it as we've done in the past.
Yeah, it's no different than the political speech that we heard at the school board meeting. We heard both sides. It became crazy.
It is different because these are students that, if it's a football game
They're captive
specifically, it's
audience.
different. Yeah.
And two, for years, people have, I mean, even with our own school board races, we weren't allowed on property, and those of us who were running, if it was a polling place, they placed their sign across the street. I mean, there's residential areas around our schools where those signs can be placed, and people can see those, and they can be put in the back of the trucks, they can, be handheld, so.
Mr. Tidwell, there are some different rules for wearing a political T-shirt, and a student has that right, but a teacher or a faculty member or someone at the school does not have that right. That went all the way to the Supreme Court. Am I right, Tinker? Is that the Tinker case? It's very interesting who has the right to do something in a public forum like that, but the student's speech cannot be tamped down with a political T-shirt on. But the employee and the principal and the people who work for us cannot do that.
But to Mr. Tidwell's point, if the candidate wanted to put on that shirt, walk into that football game, there's no one going to tell him to take it off. He wants to come in with 6 people that all have that shirt on. So that's my point. And When you're at nighttime and you're at a ball game, that is a public. The town is showing up for that. It's not just those students. It's not just, it's going to be people from outside that school. It's going to be alumni. It's going to be, that's just a perfect forum for you to, if you're running for public office, to be visible. And that's all I'm asking, is that they can be visible away from not handing out literature, not slapping stickers on people, just be away from the crowd, but not necessarily have to be on the road impeding people coming in. I don't want him to bother anyone, not talk to anyone, just hold a sign. If that's not okay, then what's the difference in him standing out there with a big shirt on?
Would the administrators be responsible for
Yes.
regulating the difference?
They would, and what I'm scared, we can say it's public, but I and this board is still responsible legally for their safety because there are students there who stayed after school and we're in loco parentis for them. And so if violence breaks out because of that, we're charged with it because that is still our athletic event. Now, if we host a Saturday, something different on a Saturday, the parents aren't, any community or community outreach thing, that's going to be different than an athletic event.
Can I,
And I would say from the principal standpoint, until you experience having to get between some parents, and it is very disheartening, extremely disheartening, when you're trying to have an event for children and to celebrate school, but we can never control, nor should we ever think that we could, someone's words. And we live in such a time now that it doesn't take a sentence anymore. It takes a word. And when the principal has to step in, and yes, we're the ones that have to be right there at that, because security is limited in nature. There is not money there to have additional SROs in these situations. And until, I tell you, until you've had to do that yourself, it is very discomforting knowing that your children have just experienced it. And they're watching every move that I make as a leader on what I say, how I say, and even my body response.
can I say just a moment, please? I don't want to disrupt this good discussion, but for those of you who tuned in at 6 o'clock for the special call meeting, we are finalizing our policies for the policy committee meeting. I can't even talk, y'all. It started at 5 o'clock, so we've got about 6 more policies. So if y'all will bear with us, we will get to the special call meeting. Thank you. I'm sorry. Just wanted to let them know that.
Do you want to say 6:45?
Probably about 6:45.
That's fair.
Anyone, any other discussion? Mr. Brooks? You need to-
Does anybody have any suggestions if we could kind of modify the policy to some extent?
I mean,
In the middle?
my suggestion, if you were going to move, the only way that I could see it is if you did it outside of school hours. Let me ask one quick follow-up to what Ms. Bratton has said. So you said no, a teacher and administrator, Supreme Court ruled they couldn't wear it, right? Could a teacher or administrator wear it to the football game?
Not if they are there under duty.
No, I'm not talking about on duty, if they're coming to watch the football game.
Probably not.
I think the general assumption on that was that they would be on duty. Who would know if they were or not? If you're there at the game, there would be an assumption of
So
being on
there's an
duty.
assumption there. But it seems like if they were going into the game, regardless. Well, I'll say as an example, let me change my example a little bit to make sense. I'm just trying to understand this from all angles. If an Oakland teacher goes to a Riverdale game, they're clearly not on duty, but they would still be a teacher administrator, but then they could wear whatever they wanted to that game as a public citizen. Yeah.
There's a statute that prohibits teachers from campaigning on school grounds.
Yeah.
So that's where that stems from, because I guess the legislature did not want our teachers being partisan and being
Right.
involved in schools. So that's where it stems. But when they're off duty, they have the right to campaign for whoever they want to, or whatever they want to do when they're off duty. And so they can do that. There's also a statute that allows them to bring, even though they can't campaign on their campus, there is a bumper sticker exception that allows them to have a bumper sticker on their car. They can still keep the bumper sticker on their car if they drive the car to school. So
So how is it different if someone drives a car in the parking lot and they pick the very first space and they have a big old sign on the car?
The statute is a bumper sticker, so it's a statute that allows teachers to have bumper stickers,
But-
and bumper size stickers.
Right, I'm not talking about teachers, I'm talking about citizens.
These are citizens.
Yeah, I'm not talking about teachers or principals, I'm saying a citizen drives in with a car and has a big sign on the car. Are we gonna ask them to remove the car?
The sign in question that happened at the school was the size of, which you would put on a magnet on the same size. And all that was done was quietly held a sign.
My proposal would be, if we're going to move this way, because I think, again, as we've discussed, I don't think anybody here on these tables wants to politicize the schools.
No.
I for sure do not want to do that. On the other hand, I don't want to violate anybody's freedom of speech either. So it wouldn't be fair to restrict certain individuals and not restrict others, and it just gets back and forth. My proposal idea would be, if you're going to, if the board sees fit to allow it, then maybe you do it on extra, outside of school hours, so nothing could possibly happen during school hours. You do it only in a school parking space, and so you'd contain one parking space, so they'd be contained to that area, and it would just only be a sign. There would be no pamphlets, there would be no speakers, there would be no music, there'd be no anything else. It would just be simply a sign. That would be the proposal that I'd lay forth, to set the parameters very strictly while still allowing that individual to have their freedom of speech.
So would that be the case? And let's say you have an event and there's a violation. Do you come back to the policy committee and go back and change the policy because one person messed it up again? I mean, are we making a policy because, has this been an over issue with many individuals, or did it just happen, was it an isolated event that caused us as a committee to start addressing it? Because if that's the case, my question is, if there's a policy written that then says you are restricted to one parking lot, first of all, okay, now you're saying principals, you gotta go out and monitor that one parking lot. Because who's gonna come do it for me, right? So now I have 3 parking lots that are taken up for this. Now we're back to the table.
Once it's allowed, everybody's it's gonna be.
Can I ask, and I'm legitimately asking because this is what I did, is what is the problem if that, I can completely get wanting to capture the attention of a lot of people in one space. I'm very concerned about turning our school campuses into political playgrounds, so to speak. What is wrong with someone standing further down the street from the school on the sidewalk and holding the same sign
I've done it for years.
so that people can see it as they're driving in and out of the school, but they're not actually on school property? And so you don't have that potential physical engagement because people are just kind of driving by. That would be my question, because that's what I did. I stayed away from school grounds, held my sign and stood on a sidewalk, waved at everybody. That would be my question, is why does it have to be on the school campus? Because then you really are, we're kind of opening the door to a whole lot of political, and I don't want to trample on anybody's freedom of speech either, but I didn't have an issue with it. I stood away from the school on a sidewalk and held the sign up and went on about my day, but I'm just asking.
I don't believe that we should ask the principals to have to police.
I don't think they have to police it either.
Another event or another situation.
Yeah, I concur, because we've got too many other things for these guys to manage. I mean, it's bad enough with shootings going on in their parking lots anymore. So let's let them focus on their school activities and not give them something else to manage.
Well, I came here because I feel strongly about this, but I'll bow to the rest of the will. But I would like to amend our policy to allow someone to stand back at least 100, 150 feet back and hold a sign quietly in one parking spot. That to me is the same as having a sticker on their car.
Second.
With that-
Roll call? Roll call. Okay. Dr. Sullivan?
No, sorry.
Mr. Brooks is gone. Ms. Quessenberry?
No.
Ms. Benavides? Ms. Creekmore? Dr. Holman? Dr. Goulian? Dr. Martin? Ms. Darby?
No.
Ms. Rosales?
Yes.
Mr. Young?
No.
Ms. Bratton?
No.
Ms. Maxwell?
Yes.
Mr. Tidwell?
Yes.
And Ms. Sharp?
No.
$11 noes and 3 yeses.
And the rest of these are much less controversial, just FYI. Because these were brought forth by committee members or board members or educators.
For
a lot-
discussion.
For discussion, and so a lot of these become routine.
Okay, next one is policy 1.901, which is the charter school application policy. And this updates deadlines pursuant to the State Board of Education rules. So it used to be 4:30 PM that applications for a charter school had to be submitted, but the State Board of Education changed that to 11:59, so you'll see that change is highlighted. And then they also asked that we include language that says the director of schools or his or her designee shall determine whether an application is complete within 10 business days of receiving the application and shall notify the sponsor within 5 business days of the determination if the application is determined to be incomplete.
And the State Department of Education does that anyways. They send you an email when they get it, because that's part of the process. Myself and the state have to get it, and they require within 5 days for you to respond that you've received it. So just follows that language.
Any discussion? Ms. Bratton?
No discussion, I'm ready to move.
All right. Like to move, sorry, like to move we accept this language. Thank you.
A second.
Thank you. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes to adopt this policy.
Policy 1.903, this is also charter schools. This is for charter school oversight. And this also updates language pursuant to State Board of Education rules. And so there's only one little tiny change, which is a clarification. And it just states that a minimum of 1 site visit to each charter school shall be conducted annually. Prior to that, it just said a site visit. So they just want to clarify that.
Move to accept the language.
Thank you, Ms. Darby.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone wish to abstain or oppose? Motion passes to adopt.
Thank you, Ms. Sharp. Next policy, 2.810, payment procedures.
And I will hit this one. So again, my role is to make sure that I am implementing the board's policy, and I've reviewed all policies twice. Lines 3 through 4 says, as operating procedure, the director of school shall present to the board each month a list of bills for payment. The list will be supported by invoices and vouchers. You can see this was last updated in 2009. And so I would rather change this to, as operating procedure, the director of school shall present to the board each month a list of revenues and expenditures, like we've been doing the last couple months anyways. I don't think you guys want to see every invoice. I mean, we can bring it, but I don't think you want to see that. But we can make it happen.
Once a year?
Do what?
Do we do that once a year? I mean, I don't think any of us has had, I've never seen an invoice.
That'll be a lot of invoices.
Doesn't, I mean, we don't have to see it paper-wise. I mean,
Because technically you can look at it anytime. It's open. It's open. Let me get with Brian and see the best way to do that, because that wouldn't be a bad idea for you just to see, even if it's invoices. Here's the, I'm trying to think of the way that I've seen it in another county, was they had, here are the vendors we paid and here's how much we paid to each vendor, so that you could see the invoices to each vendor instead of each individual invoice and each individual receipt.
So what about quarterly? Because once a year, annually, that's going to be a lot.
Quarterly is going to be a lot for our staff. I'm just, we
But
have.
once a year is going to be better? Or biannually, every 6 months?
Yeah. We can, it's huge. I mean, you're talking about
Right, that's what I'm saying.
thousands of
So
invoices a month.
If we're going for 1 year to do it all, that's going to be tons of pages, so I'm trying to scale it down to,
So right now, we're not doing this at all, and so I'm going to have to task somebody with doing this.
okay. I
We'll
mean,
have to
I'm
hire
good with
additional help.
what you requested,
Yeah.
but.
Like, we're not trying to
She was
hide anything. I'm just
asking-
trying to look at the
The chair was
scale.
asking about seeing it
Yeah.
annually, the invoices, and I'm thinking that's going to be a lot of invoices. If we scale it down, can we do it in smaller chunks?
Or if you change language to revenues and expenditures
You guys are seeing that.
and add to it with request to see invoices available at the request of,
Whoever.
Yeah, I think that's
Mr.
perfectly fine.
Mr.
It's
Yar,
all, it's all open record.
we didn't hear what you,
All of it.
I didn't hear what you said, so.
So we would have to hire additional help, and we don't want to do that.
100%.
No, we don't wanna-
100%.
So, yeah, I definitely don't want to create a new job and more work, so I'll take that back, don't worry.
So the proposed language, just so I'm clear, would be, as operating procedure, the director of schools shall present to the board each month a list of revenues and expenditures. the
And
rest of-
financial summary. Add that, and financial summary, because that's part of that together.
And financial summary, and then the rest of lines 3 and 4 are struck.
And then you can add,
Yeah, would you,
as requested, supported invoices and vouchers. Available on request, something like that, yep. This was just one in looking at that had been updated since 2009, and it was, I doubt we were electronic at that time even. I'm sure it was all paper.
We've grown a little bit since then. I'll entertain a motion if no further discussion.
move to approve?
Thank you, Mr. Tidwell. Thank you, Ms. Bratton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Anyone wish to abstain? Motion passes for 2.810.
Thank you. Next one is policy 4.602, grade point average and class rank. There is some language that clarifies class rank and calculation of GPA. And then also, there was a request to put this on for discussion regarding criteria for valedictorians. And because I have Dr. Martin here, I will ask her to tell the board or the committee about the proposed changes.
Okay, so first of all, with class rank, we've had a lot of discussions with our school counselors the last several years. We also now have a school counselor coordinator for our district office with Ms. Christine Bryan, and she's doing a fabulous job. I do want to give her that shout out. But with this, just the feedback from our counselors, that class rank is very misleading on that transcript. We have kept it on our transcript because it is in policy that we will put it there. Of course, we include the GPA. You have the course, what courses a student has taken in their high school career, so you can see the rigor of a student's transcript. But when you have that class rank, that does not always consider the rigor that an individual student has taken. So you may have a student who is a higher class rank than another student who is maybe taken a much more rigorous course load, which is what we promote with our students, yet it is not reflected in the class rank. And so it is misleading and sometimes also puts students at a disadvantage when applying to universities. So we are asking that we remove the class rank from our current transcripts, that we do not rank our students. That is not to say there are certain situations, whether it's a scholarship a student is applying for, where they are requesting that you rank that student. We can always run that information in Skyward. Again, it's misleading because it's simply based on the GPA. But if we do remove that from the transcript, that's going to help our students that we are encouraging to take a much more rigorous course load. So basically, the only thing that we're asking here is to mark out taking off the class rank, which was in line 1, and then also that would completely remove line 5, because if we took that out, that would no longer be relevant.
Any discussion? Comments?
Well, do you want to talk about valedictorian, or
No, I'd mentioned, I had a parent that was talking about how we come up with valedictorian and had some of the changes been made over the year, but Ms. Martin, great. Yeah, she's incredible. She cleared it all up for me and the parents. It was awesome.
I know a lot of parents are happy that we changed the grade scale. That's been a bailiwick for many years for a lot of people. This goes along more with college.
Exactly. I was getting ready to say that. Much better.
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you so much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or wish to abstain? Motion passes to adopt that.
Policy 4.604, credit for prior courses. This also clarifies language for EOC end of course exams, and I will also let Dr. Martin take it away.
That was something that we had proposed from the Curriculum and Instruction Department. After a little more investigation the last couple of days, we would like to table that. We'd like to do a little more research with the state policy to make sure we are following that. So we would like to table that at this time.
We're not sure our state policy, or our policy currently follows state policy as written, so before we make any other changes, we need to update that.
I'll entertain a motion to table.
So move.
Thank you. We have a second? Thank you so much. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Policy 6.202 regarding homeschools. This would add language that homeschooled students can participate in Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps units, JROTC, as required by federal law. So this one actually came up. There was a homeschool student that wanted to participate in a JROTC program, and we noticed that we did not have it in our policy. But Colonel Rector helped me out and showed me the federal law that says that that is included. So we are now including it to make it clear and transparent for all. So that's the highlighted language that just says each public secondary education institution that maintains a JROTC unit shall permit membership in the unit to homeschooled students residing in the area served by the institution who are qualified for membership in the unit. And that's verbatim from the federal law.
Do have a question. I don't want to deny anybody that opportunity. I think it's great. But do we get the funds to follow that student to pay for the junior ROTC?
We would not. We probably will with TISA. We will get a section of whatever they're enrolled because we would enroll them into the JROTC course code.
Yeah,
That would
we
be
should get
different.
some funds there.
That would be different than like a homeschooled fine arts person being able to come through band and participate in the day because we would not. But since this is federal, we felt like we needed to. But we should, for that one class period, get it.
Good.
But under BP, no. we
Question, Mr. Young. Good question. There's no further discussion. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Thank you, Ms. Maxwell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes to adopt JROTC.
Thank you. Policy 6.317, this is the Student Disciplinary Hearing Authority. It adds review of a DHA decision by the Director of Schools. This is modeled on TSBA policy, so it changes the language slightly. Still keeps that the board appoints members of the DHA.
And this follows the model, it is from the county that we looked at our board retreat.
Yes. And then adds in the language that within 5 calendar days of the DHA making a decision, that can be requested for a review by the Director of Schools. And then, of course, the next step on would be for a review by the board with the same process as we've been doing, affirm the decision, modify the decision to a lesser penalty, or grant a hearing before the board. So all that would still stay the same, but adds another step, another option for students and parents for review.
And I do envision still a lot of, there will be multiples that still make it to the board, but this will help in issues where there is some disagreement or discrepancy on what actually occurred. it gives me in policy the option to intervene, to where in the past, I did not have that option to intervene.
Yeah.
And additionally, it speeds up the process
Yes,
a
it
little
does.
bit also, because there's such, just a time delay between scheduling the DHA hearing and then whenever our next policy board meeting is. So this one actually would be within 5 calendar days of the DHA rendering a decision. So
I
that
do
could
think that's
speed it up.
important.
Yes.
I do think that's important.
So this is going to be a required step.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be a step that if someone does not like the DHA's decision, they then they would appeal to me, and I would make a decision, and then they still appeal to the board if they don't like my decision. And again, for most of them,
Right.
the ones that are cut and dry, this is what occurred, someone brings a weapon, I'm going to uphold those. And so then the parent would probably still appeal to the board.
So this language implies that it's required? Okay. Just want to make sure it was not,
Yeah, it was the
Not
next
optional.
step. Yeah.
It's the next step.
exactly.
This is a much-needed added step, and I move to approve.
Thank you, Mr. Young.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes to adopt.
Thank you. Policy 6.407, school social work services. This changes language to clarify services of school social workers. It looks like a total rewrite. It's a lot of the same functions, and Dr. Goulian, you could talk about this one if the committee has any questions. But it just kind of goes through and specifies what the services are in a more clear and concise and updated manner.
You can see the last update of 1/15/2009.
Yeah.
It's been a minute. And a lot of crisis management, I believe, correct?
Any comments or questions? I'll entertain a motion. Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Young. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes to adopt and update 6.407.
Okay. Policy 6.701, student solicitations fundraising activities. This changes language from the director of schools to the principal for approval of fundraising activities. This was requested by the Budget and Finance Department to streamline. We have so many fundraisers that are happening at the schools, and it's a very long process with the bookkeeper sending them up here to central office. Budget and Finance has to review, I have to review, and then they're sent back to the school. So some of these would just go to the principal, and the principal would have the discretion to approve those.
Because ultimately, the principal was by designee or the director of schools designee, because these are all school-level fundraisers.
Correct.
Is there a policy for, like, if a parent wants, to, or they want, an organization wants to do something and the principal turned it down, and they think that that shouldn't have happened? Is there a policy? Is there a way for them to go and appeal to the director?
Yeah, they can all,
Organization, what do you mean, like a booster club?
I'm thinking booster club,
Or
I'm
a
thinking,
PTO.
yeah, something like that.
Okay.
What if the principal just, in his mind, just doesn't want them? Doesn't want the kids selling stuff? But a lot of these groups and organizations, they have to have these things. And is there a policy a way that they can go appeal to the director of schools?
so I think there's a couple quick things on that. One, I don't think a fundraiser is going to be successful if it doesn't have school building level support. And so that's going to be a hard fundraiser if the principal doesn't agree with it. If we are asking an outside agency to come in and do a fundraiser, yes, they could always do a district-wide fundraiser as well, and then designate the funds to that school. So that's something that is not necessarily in this policy right here, because this is talking about school level. But if, let's say, Christiana Middle, I don't even know if they have a booster club, their football booster club wanted to do a fundraiser, and the school didn't want them to do a fundraiser at that time because they already had 4 other fundraisers going on. Christiana Middle's booster could say, we are doing this as a district-wide fundraiser, and in their form, they could say, we're allocating the funds to the football stuff.
Okay.
I know that may be nuanced, but if you're,
No, I get what you're saying.
building's got to look at the whole aspect of the programs, all of them. And now, you've never gotten into a fight unless you've gotten into a middle school fight of who's hosting Valentine's Dance, which athletic team is hosting Valentine's Dance, because that's a good one, isn't it, Dr. Holman?
Any further questions? I'll entertain a motion. Thank you, Ms. Bratton. Do we have a second? Thank you so much. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed or wish to abstain? Motion passes to update 6.701.
Thank you, Ms. Sharp. Okay, that concludes policy changes, and then we have one lonely new policy. We're going to call this one Policy 3.501, Water Access, and this is to address water access by students. The purpose is to just make sure that all new construction or remodels over 50% have water filling stations, and that would start with construction beginning in January of 2024, I believe.
That's correct.
Yes.
And any renovations that incorporate more than 50% of the entire area of the school.
This is something that Ms. Etta Jackson with the American Heart Association has been working on with Jenna Setzel, and they've included me a lot on those conversations. I think it's a wonderful thing. I know the kids use them over at Barfield. We use them here at the central office, so I think it'd be great to include those moving forward.
I think for anybody that coaches junior pro basketball, one outside of the gym at Christiana Elementary would be a great place to have.
Yes.
Just,
How many water bottle stations do we have in our new high schools? Is there a certain number?
He was here. I thought it was going to be 30 minutes.
I know at our new middle
We've gone
school it
over
was
it.
2. I don't, 1. That was 1. When we first got it, it was
Lot
1.
For all those
Yeah.
kiddos.
Yeah, we may need to look at,
So,
I really think we need to look at the numbers because,
yeah, it'll move to 50.
One bottle. Yeah, I don't see that being adequate at all. And especially if you've got a lot of kids that are lining up to fill their water bottle and they've got to get to class in 6 minutes. It's not happening. So I think we need to look at having way more than that number.
Our grant writer can work on that once we get there.
Like the water bottle and then the actual fountain.
Yeah.
And all of that.
No, they're-
Okay,
yeah.
got some of those. Okay. We've got lots of kids who don't have water bottles and they're like, I have a cup, please. They want the water.
Is it attached to the water fountain?
yeah, that's like the one over here.
I see, yeah, okay.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Rosales and Mr. Tidwell. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 3.501.
Thank you. And that takes us to number 7, which is the annual policy review. And again, this goes back to, by state law, the board is required every 2 years to review all policies. And then to be a board of distinction, TSBA asks that we do that annually. And I think because of COVID, we're a little behind on that, so we're trying to catch up. So we are now on Section 3, which is support services. And I did not print all
Yeah.
those for you all.
There's a
Of course,
couple,
they're all
just
online.
looking at procedural things, kind of the way Monica and I have talked about moving this forward starting in January. In the past, when we were doing our annual review, or really policy review, it started at the school board level and then went to the policy committee kind of to discuss. Especially for the annual review during COVID, that kind of changed. We'd like to go back to starting in January, where we will do Section 4 in January. And instead of us having to wait to review Section 4 for a policy committee, we can go ahead and review Section 4 as a board. And if there's something we need to change, we can always go ahead and move forward there. But that way we're not waiting on a policy committee meeting. We can go ahead and look at those changes. We will probably, I would imagine, put this on our December 13th for approval, so we have time. So between now and December, if there's something on these policies that you would like to look at, a couple of them I would just like to bring up. If you will look at 3.200. So this is building and grounds management. We're going to discuss this a little bit in our meeting here in just a minute. This talks about principals, making sure that when we're talking about custodial services, One of the things that we are tasked in this policy to do is to look at our custodial services and operations of the plant, and we're struggling with custodial services. So I'll bring that to you November 22nd to kind of discuss where we are. We're 53 positions down as of today, so we're struggling. The other one involves, we look at 3.10, yeah, click that one. That's okay. That's okay. And this goes just with, and this kind of goes with our custodial as well. Here's just some of our aspects, and we can change this issue date. All of this pretty much still applies. The board develops a plan for the management of our buildings, provides building maintenance, provides sufficient supplies, student transportation. So these are all pretty much how we're just operations. A couple other ones just a quick hit on 3.204 and 3.2041. So those are pandemic and then epidemic emergency cleaning. And then the other one we don't want to discuss is the mask requirement, that portion. So my recommendation is that we remove these from policy. We're not in that right now, so I would recommend we go ahead and move that. And we save them in the event anything was ever needed again, and pray that we don't, because I don't want to go there either. But that would be my recommendation as we move forward in December to remove those policies. 3.208. And this is really where we're getting to tonight. So this policy, again, was put in place in 2013. It's part of where Trey Lee's annual things come from, but it is in policy that the principals of each school are supposed to submit an assessment. They do this through their budget cycle, but that's not necessarily through an assessment. And you'll see the 6 things it says that they need to give us input on. So we talked about this at our principals meeting today. We won't do their budget process probably till January, but to go ahead, and we sent them their capacities today that the board has been looking at to make sure that they agreed with the number of buildings, classrooms, all that kind of stuff they have. And if there are any needs, Trey does a great job in showing them their capital maintenance, the 177 fund. They get to see what's on there and kind of where they rank. And that, I will say, that didn't happen. Even my first year as a principal, Trey was not in that role. I didn't see that. And so that is good to see, but it is in policy, so we'll make sure our principals do that portion as well. We've had some discussion on 3.220. I think it's 3, yeah. Access to private facilities. So this involves students who need access to private facilities for one reason or the other. It is in policy and follows, is this our state law?
Yes, correct.
Strictly out of state law, and our administrative procedure is they contact the school principal to access a private. Yep. There's a form. Yep. Mm-hmm. The last couple ones I will look at, so look at 3.4031. A lot of these you guys have already looked at. So 3.4031 was last updated. I believe this one was September 22nd. Or, yeah, not December, sorry. So July 22nd, or of 2022. So we've updated these policies recently. This is just our annual review portion of it. And then we have one other one, 3.600, that's pretty outdated, that we'll be working on a review. Monica got a response from TSBA that involves insurance management, offering, you can probably hit on that better than I can, because I just saw the email come through.
Many years ago, the school system did offer an insurance program for, mostly it was athletics.
Yep.
And so that has not been in place for many years. I don't know how many. So it is optional, but we just want to make sure that, again, our policies reflect what we are currently doing. And so this one does not, and so we'll work on getting that up to speed.
And so just to kind of finalize that, if there's any between now and December 13th that you would like to review, this will be kind of our annual review. I want to give a shout out to our legal team real quick. We started, so one thing previous board and this board tasked me with doing was making sure our admin procedures were published and updated. So the board is charged with setting policy, and then admin procedures are the director of school's responsibility to carry out policy. We have multiple homes for admin procedures. Some are online, some are in notebooks from 2010, 2012, and they're all over the place. So we are taking one section at a time. We've reviewed all section 1, taking the policy, making sure we have a procedure, if needed, to hit each one of those. We're hitting section 2 next week, and so that hopefully within the next couple months, not just for our principals, but for our parents and for everyone, here's our policy, here's the procedure of what we do as a district to implement that policy, so that everyone has an idea of how we operate. It probably was that way at one point. There are these great notebooks from 2010, but I don't know that I've seen one since then. So.
And our goal is to put them online with the policy manual so that it's accessible by everyone.
Thank you guys for your work, because it's a bunch. Yeah.
It's all Ms. Bickford.
Any further discussion? I say we are adjourned. Thank you so much. We will reconvene at 7 o'clock.